If you find this effort and these events useful, these are the women who put together, those myself included, these are the women who put together to birth this baby. And we do often call it a baby, including sometimes the rowdy Facebook group that we call it our 300-pound baby. The people laughing know what goes on in the Facebook group. That's why they're laughing. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce our first speaker for the 2021 Haitian Ladies Symposium. This year, we are igniting our power in all ways. Our first speaker today is Miss Karen Andre, who truly needs no introduction, but I will introduce her. Karen is the Consumer Education and External Affairs. Sorry, stumbling over my words here. Karen Andre is the Consumer Education and External Affairs Associate Director for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's an independent agency of the United States government. Many people don't realize that outside of the departments that you recognize, the State Department, Treasury, that there are over 400 independent agencies within the US government. Karen has dedicated her life to public service and advocacy. She was recently appointed as the Associate Director for Consumer Education and External Affairs. Ms. Andre served in the White House as the Special Assistant to the President for Economic Agency Personnel after her historic turn as Senior Advisor for Florida and Senior Advisor for National Faith Outreach in the 2020 presidential election. She has also served as a Senior Advisor to Andrew Gillum in the 2018 Democratic nominee for governor in Florida. From 2014 to 2017, she served as a presidential appointee in the Obama administration as the White House liaison for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. She has worked to organize Haitian and African American diaspora communities nationwide on immigration and social justice issues. She is a sought-after, I agree, political strategist, speaker, host, lecturer, commentator, and, not listed here, an author. Karen?
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 1, 2. Can you hear me? Is that good? Test, test, test. I'm gonna act like I'm a DJ. Testing, testing. Like this is gonna be a great ball. I'm nervous, everyone, so give me a second. Bonjour, bonjour, bonjour. I'm gonna try not to cry because the mascara is not waterproof. The tears are because I'm home. I'm in community. I'm in fellowship with all these beautiful women. It's been 2 years since I've seen you, since we've been able to be in a room together. So this feels amazing, and a lot has happened in those 2 years, hasn't it? Way too much. Our central nervous systems are not okay. Okay? That's where the seat of our pain, our emotions, and everything we process in this world go through. And none of us are robots. None of us are made of iron. We're all human. And in the last 8 weeks alone, we, our collective community, has been devastated time and time again. And I just want to not start from a negative space, but from a true and authentic space to say, being here in this moment, in this period of history, with what we've been through, not just the last several hundred years, but in the last 2 months, it's we're at a pivotal point as a diaspora, as women, as a community, as human beings. And so I'm emotional because I love to MC. I love to get the crowd united, but the better use of my talents is this conversation. The best and highest use of our time is what we need to be focusing on, because the time and what must be done is so critical. So today's conversation will focus on power. It is the beginning of what we are going to call the Own Your Power series, because as we all know, depuis femmes haïtiennes mettent tête ensemble, depuis yo frappe pied yo, match fini. Okay? But it takes some doing to get us to fully own our power, to be fully effective, to make the transformative change. Not superficial, not surface, transformative change that is necessary, in particular in this day and time. So this has been a divine appointment. I've had a lot to say for a long time, and it's not lost on me that we're in this moment weeks after I left the White House that many of you probably aren't very happy with right now. And I can certainly understand why, and am open to that discussion as well. But first of all, let's give the Haitian Ladies Network a round of applause for gathering us again. We'll talk more about the behind the scenes, but my sisters have been working like Hebrew slaves to hold space, to make space, and to provide the launching pad for you all, for we all, to own our power. And chapeau bas, because m'konnen nou ba dormi, mesdames, m'konnen monsieur yo fâché, ou a teke yo lundi soir. En attendant, ça gen monsieur. En attendant, chapeau bas, and thank you all for being here, for traveling, for giving your time and your resources to come together to figure out strategies. And so without further ado, today's conversation is about how we own our political power, how we build political power, what is political power. And we were intentional in not making this a panel, because panels are great. But at this time, with what we're facing and what we've just endured, we need answers, we need strategy, we need an action table, and so that's why we're doing it this way. And I'm certainly not the only person in the community that can have this conversation, but I just happened to be the first to open my big mouth when Nadine called and volunteered. So let's talk a little bit about power. I want you all to think about and raise your hand a group or an individual that when you think of the word power comes to mind. Anyone? Raise your hand. Yes. Fantastic. All right, appreciate that. Yes, sister? Michelle Obama. Okay, last one. Very good. All right, last one here.
White men in America.
White men in America. Ding, 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 ding. Oh, that's a whole other master. Oh, we can talk about Brad all day long. That's another master class. We literally have a group chat where we talk about owning the power of your inner Brad. Walking into the room like an entitled white male and making the space your own. Next Own Your Power session. But great answers, lady. So we heard Michelle Obama, we heard Haitian Ladies Network, we heard the Jewish community, and we heard white males. And from a historic lens, we know that white males founded and created this country in a way, l'angou pa yo, façon pour bénéficier tête pa yo, okay? And there's lessons, best practices and worst practices we can take from that as a community, right? Michelle Obama, I would say, is not only powerful, but is influential, okay? And the Haitian Ladies Network, there is power here. We have to figure out how to better leverage it. Would we agree? Yes. And no, the answer is not everybody give $1 and blah, blah, blah. It's a little bit more complex than that. We're going to talk about that. We're going to unpack that. And then the answer about the Jewish community. Let's take that as a model. I really appreciate that, because there are many who view the power and influence the Jewish community has in this government and in this country as something to emulate and model. But why is that? Anybody? Yes?
Their economic strength.
Economic strength. I'm glad you said that. Hold that thought. We're going to come back to that. Excellent. Yes. Unity. Okay. Unity. Anybody else?
Their power among the white men of America.
Their power among the white men of America. All excellent answers. I would submit to you that all of that is true, particularly the economic might. And what we need to do, and what I would propose, is that all of these groups do a couple of things, and they do it well and exceptionally. And this is where I want to lead you on this conversation today. They are, somebody said unity. Another word for unity is organized, right? We'll talk about what that looks like and then assess ourselves. Has anybody ever heard of a SWOT analysis? Yes. Great, excellent. I heard lots of yeses. For those who don't know what a SWOT analysis is, it's a management tool that is used often in corporate America or in the nonprofit space, where you analyze an institution, an individual, a project to see its effectiveness. So you measure its strengths, its weaknesses. What's the A again? The O. Opportunities and the threats. Merci, mesdames. Okay, thank you. I told you I was nervous, okay? So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and the threats, right? What if we did that on the Haitian American community? Another own your power. But the point is, organizing, right, requires assessing your strengths, your weakness, the opportunities, and your threats. And it takes time and deliberation to do. And if we, again, take the Jewish American community and their effectiveness in advocacy and power, we see that they are very organized. And we'll talk about how we get there. They're also very strategic. Similar, but not the same. Can anybody explain to me what you think being strategic means, particularly in the political space? Yes, Naomi.
Strategy leads to action.
Strategy leads to action.
Intentionally placing people in the right sectors.
Intentionally placing people in the right sectors. Yes. Using research to inform your goals. Absolutely great answers. And then lastly, you organize, gather people, right? You strategize, you come up with a plan and goals and a strategy to implement them. And then you mobilize and put it into action. Seems very simplistic, right? In theory, voila, okay? So if we can use that as a roadmap, one of the things I encourage is for us to do asset mapping. Because if we're going to organize, let's say we decide we want to build 100 schools in Haiti, right? The way my mind works is, who do I know? Where are they? How can I access them? How can I leverage their influence? And this brings me back to the crux of political power. Politics is, for me, in my definition, it's the art and the history of relationships. There is no politics without humans. Politics is all a human. It's not like astrophysics and math with universal laws and gravity. You go up, you're going to come. No, everything about politics is created by us. And everything about politics is governed by us. And as a person that has been working in the political field for the last 20 years, every success, every win, every ability I've been able to score to move the needle has been based on a relationship. And we have to ask ourselves as a community, how are we in building relationships amongst each other? How are we in building relationships outside of our community? Because not for nothing, we have a reputation of being rather insular. Okay? All right. It's great for us to gather here because we have to start at the base. But do we go beyond? Do we stay in the middle circle? Okay? Because there's opportunities we miss by being so insular. Okay? Once you gather your team, you have to build bridges. We can't do it alone. And we shouldn't want to. And I have loads of examples of missed opportunities that we're going to talk about. So we talked about, back to the organizing, we talked about asset mapping. So in order to asset map, you have to know people. In order to know people, you have to get out there and circulate and network. How do you all think we do as a community in terms of networking? Okay, so you all taking notes here on some best practices? Okay, because I'm not just going to hand it to you. You all are seeing where I'm coming from, right? Let me give you a simple example. So first of all, in absolute transparency, I was not at the White House any longer as an employee the day that photo surfaced on the internet. God knows his child. He knows I probably would have gotten fired had I been sitting at a desk that day, because they made a mistake and gave me a blue badge that would have allowed me to enter into the West Wing and say WTF. So I had, my last day was that previous Friday, the 17th. Okay? Why am I sharing that? Because I was then faced with a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge was trying to find a way to be of help, both inside the White House to get them together and also be of help in the community. The opportunity was, since I was no longer in the White House, the gag that goes over your mouth, as the babuket, as my mother would call it, that goes over your mouth as a White House official was released. So prior to that, I couldn't speak to elected officials. I couldn't organize, I couldn't fundraise, I couldn't do anything political at all. And so had I still been a White House employee, I could not have picked up the phone and called people in Chuck Schumer's office. I could not have picked up the phone and talked to my friends that worked for Elizabeth Warren. I could not have picked up the phone and helped try to fundraise to help some folks get some money to the migrants. That's just strictly forbidden by the ethics rule. Now, back to asset mapping. What I was able to do, the opportunity that presented itself, is I now looked across the landscape of the last 20 years of my political career, and I started to think, and this is our thought process. Who can influence the West Wing? Okay, actually take a step back. Who are the decision makers in this issue? Is it Mayorkas at DHS? Is it Blinken at State? Is it Linda Green at the State Department? Who? Because I was in the White House, I know so much of this runs through the West Wing. So this next step is I've identified the target, okay? Taking notes, identify your target. Then identify what access or availability you have to said target, because that's where influence comes in, okay? So who do I know in the West Wing? I called the person I knew. I sent the photos. I sent the examples of what it looked like in Cuba, what it looked like in Afghanistan, what it looked like for the Asian crime bill, and said, you like these optics? Is this gonna work for us? Is this the values that we sold on the campaign? Being totally honest here. So in my personal asset mapping, I did that, identified the target, used the access that I had, and then I started to think about what other people in my network I could leverage to apply pressure on said target, okay? So you have to study the target to understand that. You have to ask, who does the West Wing jump for when they call? And I won't go over that list, but that is the list I focused on. And let me give you a little example of some of our cultural norms that sometimes hem us up. Identified the target, made contact with my direct access, and then started seeing whom else I knew could apply pressure. But guess what, guys? One of the things we don't do well is network. And one of the things we don't do well is see beyond people's titles. Some of our cultural norms are holding us up. Maybe not you all in this room. C'est pas nous-mêmes, non, mesdames. C'est pas nous-mêmes, nous, dans Internet, là, c'est pas nous-mêmes. C'est pas avec nous, l'autre haïtien, yo. L'autre haïtien, yo, ils ont tendance, ils ont des gens élitistes. Oh, ils ont ceci, cela. But guess what? Karen Andre was the bomb 10 years ago before you ever knew who she was. Gerlin Jodef was the bomb 10 years ago before you ever knew who she was. So it's not the title that makes us, right? It's your heart, it's what you stand for, and your capacity. I say all that to say that it just so happened the Saturday night before this horrible photo came out, I met a young man who, if I were thinking in my Haitian elitist brain, did not have a title that was high enough for me to pay attention to him. But because I'm not Haitian in that sense, and he was introduced to me as a staffer in Chuck Schumer's office, not even knowing what was around the corner on Monday, I said, oh, you in Leader Schumer's office? Oh. Regine! Hello! Okay, I'm gonna really enjoy this example now. Because I don't know Regine, but her and my son are now best friends. Great job. So you can appreciate this. You absolutely trained him well. Last day is the 17th. On the 18th, I'm at an event, another young Haitian, because we have to groom and mentor. We don't do enough succession planning. Write that down, please. So another young Haitian that I know from the Hill was telling me, hey, I think Tamara actually gave them the idea of forming Haitian Americans working on Capitol Hill. Organize, okay? Okay, organize. Did you know such a thing, such a group existed? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't that have been helpful to know last week? Yes. Just saying. Okay, so another mentee comes, says, hey, this is, I won't say his name, he's working in Leader Schumer's office, because I know one of the levers for the West Wing is the Senate leader, Chuck Schumer, not even knowing I would need it 48 hours later. Always looking for the opportunity. Always looking to network. Always looking to build bridges. Make allies. Always looking to also be of service. So in that moment, I was like, that's amazing that you're there. We all need to get together and talk with the young Haitians on the Hill. Let's make sure we connect. And I told the young man in between, please connect us. And they listened to me. So now, Monday comes, and I'm sitting there asset mapping, because being in leadership at a time when I personally invested my time and came to my community to say, put your faith in this future administration, you can imagine the knots in my stomach, okay? So I'm asset mapping. I was like, oh, that young man I just met. I didn't have a contact in Schumer's office before that. I didn't. But by Monday night at 10 o'clock, we were on the phone. By 12:40 p.m., Leader Schumer put out this tweet. Not only did he condemn the photo, but he called for the revocation of Title 42. He went further than we could have asked. Now, I'm not saying my call alone, because we have Haitian elected officials in New York who have great relationships with Member Schumer, but the point is organizing and asset mapping. Just that little example I can give you, okay? So when we talk again about organizing, this is organizing, creating the network. And what we tend to do is say, okay, well, this has to be the body. Maybe, if we have the capacity, you have to examine the capacity of the organization. Or this could be the place where I meet someone that could help me take it to the next level. If you're in media, this is the place where I could meet the person that's in media that we could build. I submit to you, and what I learned that week in terms of organization or the lack thereof in our community is whatever your discipline is, social worker, lawyer, doctor, nurse, teacher, if you don't know your craft and the key power players in your field and industry, not only do you know them, but you have to find a way for them to know you, for you to have access to them, because you never know when you're going to need them. So here it is, I'm having conversations with elected officials who are suggesting that maybe we write a letter to governors. It's like, we don't have time to write a letter. Okay? We just got to go straight to the DGA. sac DJ. You raise your hand to lead people. And as we know, leadership can have life-changing impact. So if you're an elected official, it's your job to know that the Democratic Governors Association exists. It's an organization of all the governors across the country that are Democrats. And if we want to activate a plan to ask said Democratic governors to take in said migrants, we can't be asking in the middle of the hurricane, sac DJ. Now, this is not a knock on my elected officials who I passionately advocate. My sister here, thank you, Councilwoman Mary Estime Irvin from North Miami for being with us. You know I advocate with you all and want to help build your power every day. But I'm giving you an example, and if I'm talking to you as a licensed clinical social worker, and I say we need some social workers at the border, and you don't know the governing association for your how can you really be of full impact and power? Okay? All right? So another situation from that week, talk to a municipal lawyer who is a city attorney for a municipality. So we're gonna put out a resolution, another thing that we do. Bel tableau. Sak resolution pa l'fè pou? Sa la fè pou? Qui est-ce k'ap l'il? How does it move? I'm sorry, like I'm at the point, in a city, right. Way away from the target, which is where, let's say Michelin, West Wing, right, is Michelin. Oui, ou la, avè ti resolution non mais Michelin. Est-ce que Michelin a viré tête gade ou with your resolution? So that's performative. It makes us feel good, makes you feel like you did something. It's like the Twitter thugs. You want to Twitter, boy, you want to. Maybe you all boop. That's it. That's it. Okay? They're not organizing. They're not strategizing. They're not asset mapping. They're not planning. Ya boy wash, ya kalone. Okay, great. But if you're not building something, if you're not adding to the infrastructure, if you're not building scale, then you're part of the problem. Yes. We will know. Yes. So I know I'm a little bit all over the place. So in our organizing, I realized that I spoke to not just Haitians, Americans who were just upset. Cuban, Venezuelan, African American, Jamaican, and in too many of them, they did not know what to do in that moment. They did not know who to call. They did not know how to access and leverage power. Okay? So I had to tell the elected officials, well, if you're a state elected official, you should convene all the other state elected officials in your state to call the DNC, okay? That's your parent organization, and tell them what the hell. And what's the message? Messaging is important. What's the message you want to send to the DNC? What matters to the DNC? Votes. So what would you say, let's say, so who else said votes on this side? So what would you say to the DNC? What's the message?
We have a big community, we have alliances, we have people who can vote, so we have to get up and step up and do something.
So she said, we have a big community and we have votes, and DNC, you should get up and do something. Let's unpack that a little bit more. Why would the DNC care about that?
Because elections are coming up, and if the House changes, they lose a lot.
2022,
Yeah.
that's right. Okay, constituents, these are your constituents. Are Haitian, right? Right, but what about the fact in terms of messaging? Let's say we talk to a Democrat who doesn't have a large Haitian constituency. This is a human rights photo. This is bigger than just us. Do you know how many African Americans were triggered? You should have seen the way the president of the NAACP was going in hard, okay? They were getting on them before I could even reach them to say get on them, okay? So again, when we're thinking, we have to think broader than the immediate nucleus. So the messaging is important, but also seeing who else can join us in this fight. Because it was a much bigger coalition, allies, right? But we just said we're not good at networking. So where are our allies? Okay? Back to the elitism. If I had applied the elitism that the other Haitians do, the national training, he is a national director for NAACP. Depuis en 2008, like chercher job, m'aider, j'aime capable. How does that repay me? I just did it to do it because I needed somebody to do it for me at a time when there was nobody to do it. So always pay it forward, always pay it back. Now he's the one of the national directors at NAACP. Hey, asset mapped friend. Would you like some talking points directly from the Haitian American community about this issue? We have folks. Hello, Francesca Menez. Hello, François. Hello, XYZ person that I know, Kika Frappe. Let me connect you with NAACP. Because if they're going to go into the West Wing, they have to have talking points that are directly from us. Because if you tell me right now to go advocate for Trinidad, and they tell me, well, you know, we gave Trinidad $3 billion of aid. I thought, oh, okay, that sounds good. But Trinidad don't get no idea. Oh, no. They promised that over 50 years. But if I don't know that, if I'm not Trinidadian, I can't fight back. So again, organizing, asset mapping, identifying your target, figuring out the levers, right? And then utilizing any and all allies that you must be building all along. I would submit to you that one of my greatest pains is to watch another shortcoming we have, our reactionary response to crisis. Let me hold your hand, sister, because whew, makabab, whew. If you think of the emergencies as bookends, right? As a matter of fact, let's do it now here. Gerline, in 2019, this is Gerline Jodef from Haitian Bridge Alliance, a woman that I think is a national treasure and should be honored by CNN as such. I got urgent calls in 2019. When the woman was found under the gate crying, that was 2019. I went back to my Instagram to double check. I know you've been in the game far before that, but I'm giving an example of bookends, okay? So crisis number one was when that video went viral. Oh, mes amis, okay. People calling me, okay, great. What's the plan? What's the strategy? What's the follow-up? Okay? Aussitôt que caméra yo ale, crickets. Gerline la toujours. Okay? She never stopped. So that's 2019, and now we're at 2021. Another viral. But what did you do between the 2 years? What didn't they? So our homework, guys, is to understand and fully own our role in being the authors of our misfortune. Creole, author. How do you say authors of our misfortune in Creole? Our homework. Okay, my pen will be lami ko on abdili. So, our homework is to take responsibility and ownership of how we are part of our authors of our own misfortune. We have to take a real stock of the things that we do and fail to do, right? If we're going to fix it. I'm not here to beat up anybody, but if, you know how Haitians go, they tell a doctor, and you know the doctor thinking is here, and Creole say here. So if I can't tell you where the pain really is, doc, okay, Dr. Harrigan, you can't really assess and help heal, right? So that's my only intention here. So how are we doing on time, by the way?
Great on time.
Oh, great. Awesome. Thank you. So as we talk about how we're the authors of our own misfortune, taking this example with our CNN national hero here, 2019 to 2021, a person in media reached out to me, okay, all right, let me connect you with this person. Let me connect you with that person. This is how you can move the needle. She didn't call me this time. She knew better because she knows nothing has happened. So one of the things that hamper us is we're reactionary and we are not proactive enough. Okay? Many of us are doing great things in our individual sphere, so it's not that I'm trying to knock that down. But if we wait till the hurricane is above us to start to say, okay, porta barrio. So the work is in between the crises, guys. The work is building, organizing, mapping, strategizing, linkaging, okay? Because I know I've literally watched a person pick up a phone and make a phone call and change either policy, somebody's life, somebody gets hired, somebody gets fired, and it really is partially who you know. The question is, who do we know? And who knows us? Back to another situation, another crisis.
Before you go to that
Yes.
point of MC privilege,
Please.
talk about timing, right? The unrealistic expectations of how quickly you get from doing something to seeing the result that you want.
Absolutely. Great question. One of the other things, because we don't study our craft, we have unrealistic expectations of what can be done and how quickly it can be done. And I'll take my beautiful councilwoman here. Any job you start in, I don't care who you are, whether you're Barack Obama, whether you're Councilwoman Steril, you're stepping into a new environment. There's new language, there's new players, there's new actors, there's new history that you have to learn. You have to learn how to do your job. Whether you're a mayor, a president, whether you're a CEO, you need time. We call it the learning curve, right? Communauté haïtienne, vous mettez en position demain. Vous supposez buy $3 billion, vous supposez deliver X, everything. Not realistic. Not realistic. I'll give you a real life example. I went to go work for a labor union, SEIU, in 2006. They asked me to work on a project to get funding from the state that was going to change the hours that CNAs had to work at the bedside. So I think they were maybe at, before they could get a break. So maybe it was, the goal was to get them to 2.5 hours. So maybe at the time they had to work 4 hours before they get a break. It's a long time when you're lifting and taking care of seniors and using your back. So worked on it and we got it passed that year. But guess what? The union had been working on that for 6 years. 6 years going back time after time, legislative session after legislative session. And so it was a confluence of opportunities that we used to make it happen. But my point is, when you're trying to wield your power, it doesn't happen overnight. Take an example. We talked about the Jewish American community. Let's talk about this whole guns rights thing in this country. They massacred children in Newtown. They killed children in Parkland. Two wealthy communities, affluent, full of powerful white males. Have they gotten gun reform yet? How long has that debate been going on? Always. And we know one of the reasons is because you have special interests on the other side and a whole lobbying core, and it's a whole thing. So how do they organize, strategize, mobilize, and asset map to move the needle? If they, who come from affluence in this country, lang nan se lang yo, pays nan se pays yo, woman, si yo même y appliqué pour nous, toujours et nous-mêmes. But we expect, okay, Karine entre la Maison Blanche, okay, everything. No, I'm one person. Karine Jean-Pierre is one person. So that brings me to talk about power versus influence. I sat down one day and I kind of looked through my photo album and I saw, photos with this elected official and that person or whatever. And I said to myself, tout ça c'est rance. It's not just you. I give it to myself too. Because to me, power and influence is answered this way. If I call them, will they pick up? If I even have their number. Right. Oh, photo for the gram. Ooh. Big deal. Sa photo sa ab devyo demain sou gen crise. Do you have their number? Will they pick up your phone? And if they pick up your phone, est-ce que c'est bluffé ya bluffé ou bien sou mande ou fait un bagay ya fait vraiment? You all see power and influence there? I'll submit to you, as we talk about power and influence and realistic expectations, those who are calling for myself or Karine or other Haitians inside the White House to resign don't understand. First of all, they didn't know I was already out, but they don't understand that those who were on the inside were shaking the table and saying, And as anemic as we may feel, the response was, please believe, if your sisters weren't inside, okay? And so we're not trying to celebrate that, but please trust that there are some people speaking truth to power on your behalf with their full chest, okay? And that you will continue to see the results of that work. But we're impatient. So, okay, Mr. Blanc, dénoncer administration, okay, great. There's a lot of backstory you don't know about that. So great. We have to have people on the inside. We have to have allies. We have to be strategic. Who said placing somebody, strategy is about placing people in certain places, right? So I hope you've taken some of the notes back into organizing. It's about coalescing, right? Seeing where your assets are, where your points are. And if you identify that you don't know or don't have the connections, then it is your job to start to be strategic and asset map and literally make a list of who do I need to know, who do I need to access in order to achieve certain goals. Let's talk a little bit about influence again. Because it's leveraging your influence, as I said earlier, that is part of your power. Okay? So you all know the name Valerie Jarrett. Yeah. Why is she a household name to you? Somebody on this side. She was influential in the Obama administration. She's a mentor to somebody you all said is powerful, Michelle Obama and Barack Obama. And one of the other aspects of power is access. Back to who will take your call, who will return your call, and who can you make an ask to, right? That will actually deliver on the ask. And it has to be the right ask. Because if I go to State Representative Doti Joseph and I say, I need you to pass immigration law, I just made the wrong ask to the wrong party, because immigration law is the exclusive province of Congress. So now I've wasted an opportunity, I've wasted a chance to make the right ask of the state representative, and I've missed the chance to catch the congressperson who's really responsible for said thing. So we have to study our craft, we have to know, right, who the right people are, what's within their purview to do, okay? Because we elect Haitians all the time and expect them to bring home all types of Santa Claus Christmas things that, one, are not realistic, but also may not be within their purview. So when we talk about influence, Valerie Jarrett is influential because of her proximity, her access, right, and her influence over the Obamas, who were the President and First Lady of the United States. Let's talk about Patrick Gaspard. Anybody know who that is? Tell me, somebody. Great. She knows his resume. Very good. No, it's great. It's important because that's asset mapping. Because at each stage of his career, he has been positioned to be an asset to this community. When he was at 1199, that's another part of what I'm talking about in terms of asset mapping and building power. One of our key allies that we do not leverage is labor, is the labor community. Do you know, syndicat, do you know how many Haitians are part of labor unions? Just taking Florida as an example, whether they're maintenance workers, whether they're service workers, nurses, CNAs, millions of dollars fall into the coffers of these labor organizations from the dues that their members pay, many of which are Haitian, okay? So 1199 SCIU, way back in the day, has been a major, comment on dit ba là? La ba nou jarret. Sans nou ba même konnen. Se ouè nou paret, nou wè sen, nou wè lumière, nou wè micro. We don't know who paid for it. And nou bezwen gourmet. We want to have a rally. But oftentimes it's labor and national organizations that people have key connections with that are underwriting these things. And if we don't know that, and if we don't have access to them, and if we don't have a relationship with them, then what are we really doing? Leonie, you're in Florida. Do you have relationships with the labor unions? Little, right? Right. But imagine, with all the good work that you and Gypsy are doing, if a linkage came with the labor organizations, because many of them may be your constituents at Sutla, right? Absolutely. So a missed opportunity that we can fix very easily. It can just be a phone call. Right. Okay, no. Just saying. We're identifying opportunities as examples here. So if we've been traversing this country for 50 years, and we cannot asset map national, regional, and local partners in all of our individual spheres, we're wasting our time, guys. Okay? So you picking up the homework? Yes. I don't care what you do and where you work, you need to know from the grassroots to the top, amen, who are the people that you need to link with. Amen. And not only for you, but also to be of help to them. Because the people who have taken my call are people that before I had an ask, I was helping them. So it's a give and take, right?
Before you move from that, I'd like you to go into spelling out what it means to pay your dues and what leverage that does for you in terms of every year there's a agenda that these unions push, whether it's at the state legislature or Congress, and how those agenda items are curated, like who decides what the union is pushing,
right,
and you as a dues paying member, what is your role in deciding what those dues then push for?
Right. So there is great power if you're a member of a labor union. A friend of mine is having an issue as an educator right now, and she joined her labor union so that they can advocate on her behalf. One of the reasons people were upset because the program at the border wasn't immediately eliminated is because there is a union. There have to be some labor negotiations to show and investigate that there was wrongdoing to make sure that you can effectively eliminate it. But you don't even know. You don't even know what's going on. Don't you want a union to fight for you on your job? So part of democracy is understanding that I may not get my way immediately. There's a process, but I'm going to follow the process. I'm going to be consistent. But what does that require? Staying engaged between the crises, right? Because we should be watching to see if that program is eliminated 3 months from that, or do they try to quietly bring it back? But guess what? We're not. Bambushit. I mean, we need to bambushit sometimes. Okay, it's part of our DNA, and I think joy is part of resistance, but the work is nonstop, it's continual. And to answer the question Tamar brought out is, these members of these labor unions have great power because, again, the bank of the labor union is filled with their dues. Those dues they use to help endorse and fund candidates who want their vote, their block vote, because if you're a labor union and you represent 50,000 people and I get your labor union to endorse me, that's 50,000 votes in my bank as a candidate, okay? And so those members have power to say, said labor union, every year you go to Tallahassee, you go to Albany, and you fight for XYZ legislation. Well, us Haitians in this organization, we're facing this issue on the ground, and we want this to be part of your legislative agenda this year. We want to exercise our power and influence and demand this, and we want to work with you all. That's an example. Did I cover it? And so, anybody ever think about that strategy? Anybody work in the labor area or have? So you know what I'm talking about. Yes, Tamar.
But it's not just labor, right? Like,
of course.
all those organizations you talked about, if I'm an elected official, getting the agenda for, the DNC, there are discussions and meetings on how they, put together their democratic agenda.
Right.
Or at the state legislature, the caucus of state legislators and things like that.
Yeah.
So at every level of all titles that we hold.
Right, absolutely. So back to, again, knowing your craft. It can be very overwhelming, I get it. But the reality is, if we don't organize ourselves, identify us, come up with a plan with goals, and sometimes we make our goals huge. Sometimes you got to start small, get small wins, and build from there. So organizing, strategizing means coming up with a plan and with actionable goals, and then mobilizing everyone that you need to activate it. And it sounds very simplistic, and I'm trying to keep top lines here so we don't have a lot of time, but the things that I've identified that stop us sometimes is us not being too insular and not networking enough. So I'm trying to leave you with the items. So networking, right? Building allies, right? And consensus building. Because the reality is, we could have leveraged not only our African American friends and allies, the greater Caribbean community was insulted. Who was calling CARICOM and asking them to put pressure on? Okay? You thinking, you following me here? Right? Who's calling the NAACP? Who's calling National Airborne League? Which one of you have a relationship with anybody, even at the local level with these? Because yo même yo leve yo campé pour nous. When's the last time you heard Haitians standing up to fight for anybody else? But nous fâchés, tout le monde supposé venir camper avec nous. Portez colère. When's the last time? Yes.
And if I may,
Yes.
it's not that people don't reach out to us.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen situations say, c'est nous haïtiens, c'est nous pour tes problèmes, and not accepting the help that the other communities are helping us because we want to be the leaders. And very often, not do it effectively. I am sorry.
You just spoke a sermon. Thank you, because that's the point, that part of our cultural norms that I forgot to talk about. I think you started a thing here.
We're 1804, so we gotta leave.
Let me make this point. I'll come back to you and remind me. Hold on. Let me call on you. I want to underscore. Thank you so much, because it's a point that I had here that I hadn't gotten to that I might have forgotten. We talked about cultural norms. We talked about the behaviors and the practices and the habits that we engage in, consciously or unconsciously, that do trip us up. Petit. You know it's going to be good when I say petit. That's the Haitian version of girl. Or as you young people say, big. So, oui, bumdu. Tamar is my witness. Coming off the 2020 presidential campaign. I did not like human beings. I was tired of all y'all. Babies and puppies, that's it. That's all I can tolerate. It was just so toxic. But it dawned on me that we won, and there was a huge opportunity here, multiple opportunities. Not even being able to see back in November that we're going to have this hellish year as a community. I was looking at knowing from the campaign the billions of dollars that were going to be resourced to build back the economy, the opportunities for small businesses, for schools, for cities, for counties, that if we were not organized, if we didn't create a cup to receive it, we were going to lose out. I was thinking about proactive good things, not even reacting to horrors and tragedies. I was asking myself, as much as I didn't like y'all or any human being at that time because I was just tired and cranky, I got to get folks to understand that we need a national organization that can mobilize, organize, strategize, not on the weekends, not after work, okay? Not part-time, full-time. Chaque seconde. Because the work is that dire and needed. And we have some. Thank God we have a Suntline in Miami that is doing social services and God's work and is the premier organization in its model of being able to be thoughtful, intelligent, deliberative. They have their own building, they're economically well-founded, and they do proper planning and succession planning. So chapeau bas to them. And I'm just going to give Florida examples because I'm from Florida. It's not a knock on New York or anybody else. We have from Haitian in Miami that was born out of crisis from the Haitian Refugee Immigration Fairness Act battle that we led in 1998. Don't let the lack of grades fool you. I've been around a little bit. And that gave birth to the ascension of the public leader that we know as Marlene Bastien, who had already been fighting. But because of her resonance at that time, went from a volunteer organization to an actual funded organization that we know today. So yes, we have some organizations that actually have staff, and they're doing work on the ground in their cities. But we do not still have a fully staffed and funded version of NAACP. We do not have a fully staffed and funded version of NALEO. Who knows what NALEO is? Not Tamar. Okay, not Leone. Anybody else? Okay. National Association of Latin Elected Officials. Okay? So they're the Latin version of the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus. Mabvini, mesdames. I said we do not have a fully staffed and funded. You see where I'm going? Okay. Trust me. So this is as much as I didn't like human beings, this is, oh yes, National Haitian American Elected Officials Network, NEON, born, I think in 2009, when, I'm getting back to your point, a group of Haitian electeds wanted to go to DC to meet with President Obama. They utilized access through Patrick Gaspard and Marie Saint-Flair in Boston to try to get a meeting. President Obama said, and Patrick said, I'm going to say it in Creole, au lieu que nous venions 2, 3 grandes 5, pour que nous pas former une organisation, qui l'organisation ça dit que c'est association de élus nationales américaines qui t'a rencontré avec le président, ça a porté plus poids. Président, oui. And his chief Haitian official gave the idea, and that was the beginning of NEON. Okay? I keep receipts now. I keep receipts. But I use them for good. My point is, this Glen Sink thing is rooted in people wanting credit far too often. I'm doing parler, mesdames. Papa, don't do that. I can't see into everyone's heart, but the reason I was bringing up the example in after the election is I went and I met with some folks that regularly fund candidates and institutions in the Haitian community in the Northeast, and I said, guys, there's opportunity coming around the corner with this administration. M'konne si m'di nou former une organisation journée jodi an, m'di ou mette Tama président, yon moun k'ap di m'pa marcher avec Tama. M'di OK, mette Geli, m'pa l'encan Geli. And we'll be going like this all day long, right? Sou di Jésus, m'pa chrétien. So don't get me started about chrétien, non-chrétien, l'évangile, catholique. You picking up what I'm putting down? Yep. Building consensus among us is like rocket science. Point number one. So I said, okay, nous, j'ai étudié nous. So I'm dit, all right, mais nous élis monsieur dame yo. You elected them. C'est nous voyons monter. Nous faisons un de fonds pour nous Valerie Jarrett, pour former un NION qui bien établi tant que CBC. Qui établit un coup n'allait yo. Oui, d'accord. Great. Okay, let's do it. Now, the minute I got called to go into the White House, and I said, okay, guys, I was gonna try to start it up for 3 months and then hand it over, but I got the call, so here's a list of 3 other amazing cerveaux that can do this work, become an executive director. We talked about this, a policy director, a communications director, because we have to have people that are going to link with the White House and the Hill to make sure we're getting our fair share of the pie that we delivered in votes. You see the thinking here? Okay, so problem number 1 is we imbue one person with too much responsibility. So the minute Karen Andre said, I can't do it, why? Because I don't know Intel that you're mentioning. Okay? I don't know. But you see this resume this person has? Again, what did I say earlier? Sometimes it's title and, blah, blah, aucun, or what have you. These things are holding us back. Back to your point, I have watched, same thing, before the campaign season started, I said, guys, millions of dollars are going to come from all over the place and rain down into the states to turn out the vote. And they're always going to realize during the election year, oh my God, we got to turn out the blacks, we got to turn out the Haitians. And if we do not organize ourselves and have a vehicle to be positioned to receive said dollars, like Bloomberg rained $400 million down, I'm not the smartest guy, in the room, guys. It's just you see it cycle after cycle. So you have to position yourself. Call for that. And what happened? 10 different organizations started overnight. Okay? Another example, I asked for people to come together to try to, like I said, build a national organization. There are people who wanted to engage the State Department around what's happening in Haiti during the election. I'm watching, boop, bloop, Association of Haitians for Advancement, Association de Bodo, like everybody's throwing up a shingle, and it's like, State Department doesn't know one from the other. Oh, why? Exactly, thank you, Leonie. Why? Parce que c'est eux-mêmes Cap réussi, c'est eux-mêmes qui prend photo en bon côté chef yo pour yo dire c'est eux-mêmes qui délivrent. And where does that leave us? Ça fait pour maman cap mari ventre en Haïti. Ça fait pour petit monde qui pas à l'école. So our insistence on individualism versus collective power and unity is literally killing us. And if we don't get it together, and the way it always gets together, as far as I'm concerned, is when the women stand up and say, hell no, which is why I'm here today, making my appeal to you. If we do not get it together, we will continue to be the authors of our misfortune. Really quickly. So we talked about the power of networking. The reason networking is important is because you build linkages and communications and access to people and institutions that have power that you might need to leverage for yourself or for a group or for others. We talked about asset mapping. If you don't know the landscape, if you don't know that there's an Alix Contav at the Kellogg Foundation, guess what foundations do? They give out money. Most of us had never heard of Open Society before Patrick Gaspard was there. How many of us put together a meeting to go to Patrick Gaspard and try to access some of that money? How many of us thought about it? You did. If you don't asset map, and asset map in a broad way, not just the person at the top, because let me tell you something. There are young people that have no special title right now, that are at the beginning of their career, that are my entry point into many, many offices that I can get intel from. It's not always the chef. We got to get past the chef. Tout moun c'est moun. And today's Timoun might be tomorrow's Michelle Obama. There is a Michelle Obama sitting in this room right now. There is a Valerie Jarrett. There is an Oprah, Haitian Oprah, in this room right now. Okay? So let's not just look at people when they arrive. Let's be instrumental in seeing everybody as a treasure, everyone as an asset, everyone as a powerhouse in their respective sphere. Okay? I'm trying to take the shackles off our brains here. It might sound simplistic. So ultimately, networking, making sure you know your individual sphere, your network from top to bottom, and then making sure that you have asset mapped all the communities that can have consensus with you on any and every issue. And then making sure that we are actually being intentional about creating fully funded organizations, not just on the political front, right? If there is a need for more nurses, there is a Haitian American Nurses Association. But are they linked to the larger National Nurses Association? Are they linked to the Nurses Union? Are they linked to the members of Congress or anywhere that have health policy as their particular issue? You see what I'm saying? So it's a 360 linkage. That is the homework, guys. That is the homework. And if you or anyone you know are not consistently organizing, asset mapping, strategizing, and mobilizing, then you are part of the problem. I invite you to be part of the solution. This is just the beginning. There is more concrete information I want to share, and I will prepare it to be shared digitally, but I just wanted to begin the conversation, and I hope something I said today will spark, influence, and motivate you to continue to build by organizing, strategizing, and mobilizing. Thank you. Tamar, I think we had one question here. Yes. Yes.
One question real quick. So to use the Texas situation as an example, right? And I'm just being a devil's advocate because for me, for instance, I'm at work, I'm working, and my phone is blowing up. Do you see what's happening in Haiti? Do you see what's happening to your Haitians? I'm like, I didn't realize what was actually going on until late that evening. So imagine the government, President Biden, and everybody in his administration getting the word, and they're already putting out fires that were happening currently or before, and we have a new fire. So using the Texas situation as an example, for me, how my brain works is how are we supposed to know that we were coming into Texas, right? I think that's, how do we begin that thought process to avoid potential crises? Who was supposed to know that we were coming from South America? And how could we have prevented that or prevented potential problems at the border?
Right.
So things like that I want us to start thinking about instead of, and that's the whole reaction thing. How do we start our thought processes, and who do we need to talk to, or who do we need to build our organization to start figuring out what the potentials could be?
So great question. And really quickly, this situation, as I mentioned, referencing the 2019 incident, is not new. That's why Gerline has literally taken over Gerline is an audio studio engineer, like really smart people, right? Like she does a whole other world of work. But being the Haitian woman that she is, gen Haitien kap sot Brésil, Chile, kap rive la frontière Mexico. On moun relate say, hey, aren't you Haitian? You might want to come check on your people. 6 years later, this thing has taken over her life. $0, zero infrastructure, zero allies, right? So she knows, and she's been advocating, saying, hey guys, got a little issue, you know? But this goes to us paying attention, right? Because les lumières en lumière, oh, tout le monde paye attention. Then we go back. Boom, tout le monde paye attention. So this came up in 2015, in 2016, in 2017, in 2018, in 2019. It just may happen to have burst through your personal bubble, but your question should be, what can I do in my particular, do you know who your state senator, your state representative is? Do you know who your U.S. senator is? Do you know who your congressperson is? And have you at least reached out to them?
Right. For this situation, so I guess my question is...
Well, what's the answer? Is that a yes or a no?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
I'm a part of all these organizations.
Okay.
So I have the context, but I don't have the insight from my perspective on all of these issues, right?
Right.
So how do we get that insight?
Right.
How would I have known that in 2015 this whole thing was happening?
Yeah.
Or what's going to happen in 10 years from now?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's my question.
Right. So in some ways, you can turn to your resources like the Haitian Elected Officials Network, who are representing you, whether you live in a highly dense Haitian American community. There are Haitian news sources and American news sources that have been covering this. It is our job to do the research and do the homework. I would submit to you that starting with those who have raised their hand to say they want to represent you is a good first step. And if you can't get the information, this is going to sound trite, but Google. If you literally had Googled Haitian migrants, just to start, right? Because we have to fact check. We have to research. We have to get beyond responding to sound bites that are often packaged to make you move a certain way, right? And clickbait, right? Because there are people who literally put things in, structure words in a certain way to evoke a reaction in you. So, nous pas qu'à quitter moun fait tête nous. And yes, I call it WhatsApp NN because it's replaced CNN. WhatsApp NN is not the most verifiable source of information. Yes. Okay, I'm gonna stay. I'm gonna stay. I've gone over my time, but I'm not going anywhere. We'll talk, but we have an amazing, you're gonna introduce it?
Yep.
So we have an amazing follow-up that's gonna talk about another type of power. I'm gonna stay so I can talk to you directly, sister. Is that okay? We're over time. Okay. Thank you, everyone.